Now, because he wasn't allowed to make it political, because the entire event was paid for by a charity, Glenn Beck instead focused on God at his rally this weekend. In fact, he sounded more like a televangelist than a libertarian, especially with the following line. He said that America today begins to turn back to God. For too long, this country has wandered in darkness. But that brings up the obvious question of which God America should turn to. In Beck's eyes, and many of his followers' eyes, that is the Christian God. But just because so many Americans were Christians, just because many of the founding fathers were, does that make America a Christian nation? Hasn't this been, since its inception, a country based upon a constitution and not on a religious gospel? Well, joining me to discuss it from Florida is Dr. Jerry Newcome, author of the book that made America How the Bible Formed Our Nation, and from Wisconsin, Dan Barker, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining me. Now, Dr. Newcome, I'm going to start with you. Do you think that just because the majority of Americans are Christians, that makes America a Christian nation?
No. I think the foundation of America is what makes America having a unique way in which God is a key part to the founding of America. And here's the main point I want to make. The Declaration of Independence is our national birth certificate. The Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times, but most importantly says that God is the source of our rights. The Constitution, 11 years later, was signed in the year of our Lord and was signed in the 11th year of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration is the why America exists. We have God-given rights, and the Constitution is the how-to of those rights. So those 2 key founding documents said that our nation is one nation under God, and because it's one nation under God, it's not up to the state to determine whether we have our rights.
Now, Dan, do you agree with Dr. Newcome's statement there?
I'm the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and we have at least 16,000 members nationwide, representing tens of millions of atheists and agnostics who flatly disagree with these comments. Our country was founded on liberty. Our country was founded on a godless constitution. By the way, the Declaration does not mention Christianity or Jesus, or doesn't even specify what kind of a deity was there. And Thomas Jefferson, as we all know, who penned the Declaration, did not believe in the God of the Bible or the Christian God. Our founding fathers explicitly in the first Congress stated the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. It's true that many of the founders were believers, but none of the founders were women. None of them thought women should vote. We are not obligated today to go back and become carbon copies of the private religious views of some of our founders. We are a proudly godless secular nation, and much better off because our founders were wise enough to distance themselves from the divisiveness of the early colonies, who used to persecute and exclude and banish those who did not have the right faith. So no, America never was a godly nation. It is not now, and we are better off because of that.
Could I respond to that?
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I don't agree with a lot of the points you made, obviously, but here's the point, the important point. In a secular state that is based on a godless foundation, as you had, for example, in the former Soviet Union, which didn't work out too well, tens of millions of people were killed. In fact, one convert to Catholicism out of an atheistic, actually Marxist background, this couple used to be communists, and they said when the Soviet Union finally collapsed, they couldn't even deliver the goods. They couldn't even feed the people. What was left? All that was left were tens of millions of corpses. And in a godless state, there are no rights, whereas in a Christian state, Christian context, and because, by the way, America was founded as a Christian nation, people of all faiths or no faiths are welcome here. But the foundation is still there, and it's still that Christian foundation. I mean, those are the facts of history, and because of that, we have rights. And see, God-given rights are non-negotiable. As John F. Kennedy once said, the rights of man don't come from the generous hand of the state, but from the generous hand of God. And there's a huge difference.
But do you think that some people out there might, you know, take what you might deem to be the good Christian principles that make a free, liberty-loving country and try to twist those in order so that they can persecute other people?
That's exactly what has happened with Christianity. All through history, that's exactly what has happened. Jerry's comments are completely irrelevant and a non sequitur. You don't choose truth by stacking up the bodies. If we did, Christianity also has a huge stack of bodies to its credit.
Nowhere near as well. When did your encyclopedia expire? I mean, that's not. I'm serious. If you compare atheism versus Christianity on the front of killing.
Well, Dr. Newcome, we can't just pretend like the Crusades never happened.
I agree, and those 2 million people that were killed in the Crusades, that's terrible, and the 30,000 people that were killed in the Spanish Inquisition, that's terrible. I've got in my office the big black book of communism, published 1996 by Harvard University Press. My goodness, you're talking about 100 million people, if not more.
But do more bodies necessarily make it, make it any worse? I mean, the fact that people are persecuted under the name of a specific religion should be bad enough.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is that it's under the godless regimes that more people have been killed because there's no higher appeal, no higher source to appeal to in that case. And by the way, the context in which the Declaration and the Constitution were given, when they talked about God, they were talking in a population that was 99.8% professing Christian. So it's a given that we're talking about the Christian God in that context.
That's true, but there are also only 4% of them went to church. They might have said they were Christian, but they were not that religious.
I know that in some cases with rural conditions, people couldn't go to church, and yet George Washington always went to church, in virtually every circumstance he could, every Sunday he could, despite bad road conditions and so forth.
Exactly, but also the founders owned slaves. None of them thought that slaves should be emancipated. None of them thought women should vote. They all had personal opinions that do not make the rest of us obligated to follow those opinions. Our Constitution is based on we, the people. We are based not on a God, but on humanistic principles that predated the Ten Commandments, which are a very bad system of law. We have risen above the primitive ideas of the Old Testament and the brutal ideas of Jesus, who talked about owning and beating slaves, and his followers who obeyed him with relish. The Bible itself is
Jesus is the one who told us, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Jesus is the one who said, love your neighbor as yourself. Not that we've always lived up to that.
All right, gentlemen, we have to wrap it up in 1 second. But Dan, let me ask you this question very quickly. Since this is a democracy, if 80% of Americans are Christians, if people decided that they wanted to instate a national religion, do you think that they should be able to?
No, because the Constitution precludes that. You can't do away with freedom of speech or freedom of the press or freedom of assembly. Freedom of religion is hardwired into our Constitution. And people like Glenn Beck do Martin Luther King Jr. a great disservice, a man who preached against intolerance and divisiveness. And here the Christian right wants to go back to intolerance and to exclude those of us who do not believe in their particular God from full participation in the American experiment. That is wrong. We should resist that.
Our freedoms come because of Christianity. The founders gave us freedom of religion, not freedom from religion.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you both very much for joining me. And, well, I think you know my feelings on Glenn Beck. You just heard him.